Tonight we will have three portions of this debate, one for each office being run for. We will start with a question and answer section from two of the candidates, since the offices of President of the Union and Undergraduate President are currently uncontested. After those candidates have the opportunity to answer questions from us and from you all, we will have a debate between the two Grand Marshal candidates. Before we get started, we'd like to take a moment to thank everyone who made this debate possible. This event is put on by the Elections Commission of the Rensselaer Union that oversees all GM Week elections and freshman elections in the fall. We'd also like to thank RPI TV, who is live streaming this event, UPAC Lights and UPAC Sound, and Cameron McLean and the entire Union administrative staff. Without any further ado, let's get started with the President of the Union question and answer session. Our candidate for tonight is Colleen Corrigan.
Hi everyone, my name's Colleen. I'm a co-terminal student going for my MBA with an undergrad degree in ITWS. I've had about 5 years of experience in student government now, holding a variety of roles including Vice Grand Marshal, parliamentarian, and class senator for multiple years. Right now I'm Vice President on the executive board. So that's a little bit about me. I have 4 key points to my platform: executive board development, a more inclusive union, collaboration with other student organizations, and finally, more support for union organizations. Are you sure? Okay. Sorry, a little difficulty there. Yeah, so I'm ready to go, Nick, whenever.
So we're going to start with some overall general questions. So since you mentioned your platform, the first question that we have for you is, which part of your platform would you consider your highest priority and why?
My highest priority is more support for union organizations. The last 2 years, we've seen a significant decline in membership across the campus, with membership for clubs, other organizations, Greek life, everything. So my highest priority is making sure we're working with clubs to bring back that membership, because our clubs bring a great value to our campus. You know, they're kind of our heart of campus. They're the joy. So by really prioritizing clubs, I think it'll bring a lot more back to the union that we haven't been able to have in the last few years with COVID restrictions.
Thank you. You mentioned the union. A big question with the union that a lot of students have is the self-governance that used to be part of this union. Do you believe that a student-run union free of administrative quarrels is still possible and a worthwhile goal?
Yes. As I've had 5 years of experience at RPI, I've seen, the transition we've had over the years, and I really do think a student-run union is something that we should be pursuing. If you can't hear me, Nick, let me know. But I really do think that a student-run union should be most important. Right now on the executive board, we still make day-to-day decisions. We budget for clubs, we help with purchase requests alongside our union administrators, and I think that's something that's really unique to RPI and really beneficial for our community, because we as students know what students want, and it's a lot better than going through the administration. So that's something I really want to prioritize during my term if I'm elected.
Thanks for that. The next question we have, with RPI getting a new president this summer, how will you work to ensure a positive relationship with the new administration and strive to reach for those self-governance goals?
Yeah, so with the introduction of the new president, I want to make sure that we're reaching out right away to build those relations. I think that's something that's really important, being able to kind of set that precedent from the start alongside whoever is elected Grand Marshal, by really showing the new president how we operate as a union and why that's beneficial. I believe that will help transition them in and will ensure that we can work well with them. So something alongside a banquet to welcome him with other student leaders is something that I really want to see, just so he can get that experience. And as he is an alumni of RPI, I think he will be willing to work with us, and I do see a really positive future working alongside him.
Thank you. Recently, the executive board voted on and passed a motion to renovate the student government suite. What are your thoughts on this renovation, and what do you see as possible changes to the suite?
Yes, so right now we're in the process. We haven't passed a motion for any specific renovations, but I think that's something I want to prioritize, because the student government suite should first and foremost be serving the student body. I want to make sure students feel welcome to come inside, to talk to student leaders about any issues they may have going on. And to be able to do that, I want to make sure the student government suite is a working space that people feel welcome into. So some of the ideas we've talked about is introducing little like study corners on the sides, which will encourage, more collaboration and more projects, either between students or senators or anyone of that nature to work on so that it can be used more effectively than just the few spots we have right now.
Given that we're coming right out of the pandemic, why do you think now is the time to renovate the student government suite, and how do you see it improving student use of the union?
Yes, so coming out of the pandemic, I think we really need to prioritize the union. Personally, when I come through the union, I feel that it's not as full as it used to be, and that's something I really want to see improved. I really want the union to serve as a hub. We have so much here, meeting rooms, study spaces for students, food vendors, and so much more, and it's really beneficial to have this type of building on our campus. So by renovating the student government suite, we're further enabling more students to be able to come in and find spaces to study as we continue to come back from COVID restrictions. And I really think that is a priority. And through the last 2 years with careful budgeting, we do have that money so that we can, restart the union as we come back from restrictions and really, come back full force onto campus.
So you talk about restarting the union. What changes to be made, certain events to be put on, or renovations to be done, do you think need to happen for that restart you talk about?
Yeah, I really want to see more club events. Personally, that's something I find enjoyment of. I love going, either after classes or on a weekend to various clubs events, such as Winter Carnival tomorrow, small shout out. But with the COVID restrictions, I know a lot of clubs haven't been able to fully plan the events to, their fullest desires. So, as we slowly transition back to normalcy, that's something I'd like to see more of. I'd like to really plan with students well ahead of time to ensure that we're able to get those events in full force.
Yep, we just have one more question about union renovations before we move on to club budgeting. So what are some ideas that you have for future renovations of the Rensselaer Union, and how would you like to see them implemented?
Yeah, I guess for some background, for those that you don't know, right now we're planning for over the summer the Rathskeller area on the first floor to be completely renovated. That's been approved for a while now, but we're finally able to welcome construction managers to campus in order to have that finished. Personally, I think there's a lot of things that could be benefited from our union. As we said, the SGS renovation, but on top of that, right now our business operations committee chair has a survey out regarding our hair salon. Right now that's underutilized, and I want to make sure students are utilizing it to the best. And maybe that's something that we need to look into with the experience of the hairstylist, making sure that they can work on a variety of hair types for students or just other services that students are looking for. But going along that, just making sure that spaces are being utilized. I want to make sure that dedicated spaces within the union, such as the Lavender Lounge or the X Lounge, are being provided the resources they need, including furniture, so that the most benefit can be achieved from those spaces.
There are many things that were lost in the union over the course of the pandemic, but one thing in particular that many students loved prior to COVID that we don't have anymore was late night dining in the union, where people who had meal plans could use a meal swipe and get a meal at one of the eateries in Rathskeller. There have been efforts to bring this system back, but so far have been unsuccessful. Is that something you would try to bring back, and if so, how? Yes,
actually, the late night dining in the union came out while I was on the Hospitality Services and Advisory Committee under ADVAIT, and I thought that was amazing for students because it really opened up, especially for freshmen and sophomores, the variety of meals that they were able to have outside of dining halls. So I would love to look into that and look into the logistics behind it. I know there's more to it than just COVID restrictions, but I really do think it's a great benefit to students, and I want to, bring back those conversations.
Yeah, now we're going to shift our focus a little bit more towards club budgeting. So our first question is, the members of the student union will be seeing an increase in their student activity fee this upcoming fiscal year. Yet many of their clubs that they participate in will be seeing their budgets either remain the same or be decreased. Can you explain what you're looking to do to manage club budgets while also keeping the activity fee relatively steady?
Yeah, so right now the activity fee remains pretty steady. It increases relative to the rate of inflation. And a lot of that is for facilities, as most students do come to the union and use some type of resource, whether they study here, they purchase food, anything like that. And that's something that's great with the activity fee. As I myself also pay the activity fee, I'm not looking for a huge increase. I know it's really important for students that while we're able to get these benefits with the activities fee, that it's not increased very rapidly, I guess. So I want to make sure that we're also not limiting the money that clubs are able to get when budgeting. So there's two sides. I want to make sure the facilities are able to stay to their best extent as we move forward, but I also want to make sure clubs continue to be able to hold events and are given funding for that. Especially as COVID restrictions are starting to fall. I think it's very important for both school spirit and for students who enjoy planning these events to be able to have the funds for those events.
Thank you. Continuing with club budgeting, an important issue that clubs want to know when their clubs are being budgeted for is the process. Much has been talked about the transparency that goes into club budgeting. What do you feel is a proper degree of transparency relative to what the e-board has done in the past? And do you think there should be more transparency, or do you think it's at a satisfactory level?
Yeah, so right now, the transparency into budgeting falls mostly on each club's representative and how they choose to approach communicating. And I think some representatives do it amazing. They walk their clubs through the process, they explain our Rensselaer Union guidelines and procedures that we use to budget and we follow very strictly. And I think there's a lot of communication throughout the whole process, including the appeals. I do feel that, however, that there can be improvement with other clubs. I personally have talked to clubs who were unaware that the appeal process was in place, or who felt that there wasn't enough time in order to properly review their budget with their representative and appeal it. So I want to make sure that clubs understand when they should be starting the process by having representatives reach out with enough time for them to look through their budgets, as well as walk them through when budgeting weekend is and how to go about appealing if that's necessary. By making sure that the executive board is being proactive, it takes some of the pressure off of club leaders. And that's really what I'm trying to do. I think a lot of this should fall to the executive board representatives who understand the policies, rather than clubs who are new officers trying to come in and learning as much as they can about the union's policies. And by moving that responsibility back to executive board representatives, it will allow for more events to be planned and other activities. So that's really what I'm trying to do here.
Thank you for that. Speaking about executive board representatives, one thing that the PU gets to do is appoint 15 to 20 or so executive board representatives that get a vote on the executive board. What are you going to be looking for in candidates for those positions if you do win and if you do get to appoint those positions?
Yeah, so if I'm elected, I really want to see a well-rounded board. I want to make sure we have students with backgrounds in a wide variety of areas throughout campus, just so we have, different opinions as we go and discuss different aspects that the executive board handles. On top of that, I want to make sure that representatives for clubs are passionate about what they're doing. I want to make sure that in order to achieve the proactiveness level that I'm going for, I want to make sure that representatives also care about helping clubs achieve their goals. And that's something I really want to look for in a candidate, that kind of passion. I'm also looking for organization. I myself am a very organized person, and I feel that helps a lot with board operations. So that's another plus that I could see a representative bringing to the board.
Thank you. You talked about your methods for picking board representatives. Many people in the Rensselaer community, especially international students, feel left out of student government. What will you do to advertise the board to all corners of campus and make sure you're getting that well-rounded pool of candidates you were looking for?
Yeah, so I think in the past, it usually is advertised through email. And I know especially right now with the VPN, not every student's checking their email. So I don't think that's the best way to introduce people to the executive board and its operations. I really want to communicate with clubs. I've been spending the last month going around to so many clubs and getting so much good feedback about things that could be changed. And I want to continue that conversation. I want to make sure that it's not just an email that's going out, that I can actually talk to people and talk about why the executive board does what it does, and hopefully invite more people to apply from different areas around campus.
Finally, we just have a few more general questions for you. What do you think is the biggest problem with the executive board currently, and what would you do to address it?
I think the biggest problem right now lies with organization, going back to this point. And not just with executive board internal documents, but also with union documents. Right now we have the union website, which serves as a hub for both students and executive board members to access documents that are important for operations. But many of those links either redirect to the wrong location or are broken. Likewise, I am asked often where to find templates for various paperwork for clubs and things like that. So if I'm elected, one of the things I really want to do is rebuild our drive so that it's more intuitive, so representatives can more easily find paperwork, just so that process can kind of go a little quicker, as well as prioritizing the union website so that not only can executive board representatives, but also individuals within the union can better access those resources.
Thank you. Another contentious issue within the executive board is that when a vote is being taken, any stakeholders in the vote must leave the room. What is your view on this practice?
I think it really does keep bias from the room. As much as we'd like to be unbiased 100% of the time, sometimes that's difficult, especially if you're not, I guess, as well versed in that. So I think it really allows fair discussion. And one of the things I really want to see is that while we follow our policies that are set and approved, that we're employing them out on clubs fairly so that no one group is getting, I guess, better treatment than any other. So by asking individuals who are associated with the club, including representatives who may be part of that club, it really allows open conversation. And these meetings aren't closed to any other person while we ask members who are affiliated to step out. So it's still a transparent debate. It simply just removes any possible bias that could be still in the conversation.
We'd like to remind the audience at this time that there are QR codes around the room. If you would like to ask Colleen any questions, you can scan the QR code and you'll be brought to a Google form where you can type your question and it'll be sent to us and we can ask it. So if you have any questions, just use those QR codes that are posted around the room.
Finally, a little more on executive board meetings and how they run. One of the things that this year's president of the union, Yassine, did very well was being efficient with the time, and it was often complimented that the executive board was, finishing up these meetings very quickly. Do you see that practice continuing, or would you like to see, more extensive debate on some issues?
I think that, like you said, Yassine was very effective with time for executive board meetings, and I think that really helps keep members engaged. By having shorter meetings and not drawing them out for the sake of drawing them out, it allows us to get through business with equal attention to each piece of business, no matter how far through the meeting we're getting. Of course, that doesn't mean I want people to skip any questions they may have or any uncertainties. I want to make sure we're fully fleshing out any discussion that could be had. I think that's very important. Any question in the room is a great question, so I want to make sure they're all heard. But I do agree that by being efficient with our business, it does very much keep the entire board engaged.
We have a question from the audience. How do you plan to support Greek life initiatives?
Yeah, so I didn't mention this, but I am a member of Alpha Phi, so Greek life is something that I hold close to my heart. And I think that the union has a lot of great resources that can be helped for Greek life. Like I said earlier, membership has been a huge thing across campus, and that also includes Greek life. So I have a few ideas for how we can better Greek chapters throughout campus. First, I want to bring in external facilitators that are vetted to fit campus culture. I know that we had Fired Up for a few years, but I don't feel that they fully understood our campus and its unique culture, and I felt that their ideals were very one-size-fits-all. So instead, I want to make sure facilitators can help improve recruitment methods that would fit our campus. And this would go hand in hand with the activities fair that we already have and will help better prepare club leaders in order to set that up for the day and talk to potential club members as well as Greek students who are initially learning about chapters during the activities fair in the beginning of September. Second, I think the union has a ton of resources that Greek chapters can utilize that they may not be aware are there. For example, we have union marketers who can assist in any types of marketing that chapters need, whether it be some help with a poster for around campus or a social media post, as well as our social media outlets. I know our union Instagram has quite a few followers, and I think just better getting the word out that we have a very strong Greek life on campus is something that's important to me because we do have a lot of chapters that can fit any student's need across campus.
We have another audience question. So, what parts of the union do you think are underutilized?
Yeah, like I mentioned before, the hair salon, not really utilized. I've talked to a lot of people over the last month in person, and I've found maybe 5 people who've used it. So that's something I really want to work on and find why they aren't using it and how we can ensure that it's a service, in the union that students are getting the most out of. On top of that, I do feel that I personally love the games room, and I'm glad this semester that it's getting more use, but I'm not sure that every student is aware of everything that is within the games room. So that's another resource that I think will be better utilized, especially after the renovations this summer. Sorry.
Going back to the union budget, what part of the union budget do you think is the most overfunded, and what part do you think is the most underfunded?
That's a great question. Sorry, I'm trying to consider the entire budget. It's pretty large. I'm going to start with underfunded. We have a lot of new funded clubs that, specifically the last, 2 years while being formed, we've been cautious with funding just because we're not sure with policies or anything like that. So certain clubs have been held back on, the events that they've been able to have just because, we've been cautious with the circumstances. And I think that's something that has been underfunded that I hope to see changed a little bit. For overfunding, See, I think a lot of the things we fund are very important to campus. A very large part of our budget goes to facilities, but that's something that a huge amount of students get use out of. So I wouldn't say that's under or overfunded, I'm sorry. I don't know if I have an answer for overfunded. I think every program right now that we have is extremely beneficial to students. We've made sure of that in the last 2-ish years now with COVID to make sure that students' funds are being used in the best way possible. But I'd love to further that discussion with our voting representatives this upcoming fall if I'm elected.
We have another audience question here. So, what are changes you plan to prioritize, and how do you plan to support clubs that operate during the summer?
Yes. So this is an idea that we've been tossing around, the summer arch and clubs that are active during it. Right now, I don't think we have a full understanding of clubs that are active during the summer. Each club kind of sets its own policies on whether or not they'll be active. I think it depends on whether they'll have students on campus during the arch, as it is mostly juniors. I really want to collect data on that so that we can see which clubs will need support and which ones are being active so that we can prioritize those clubs. And because we have representatives from every grade level on the executive board, as well as students who typically stay in during the summer in Troy. Because of that, I think there will be interest to create almost a committee of students who want to focus on assisting clubs that are active throughout the summer. And what was the second part of that question?
That was the question.
I thought there was another part. Yeah.
Given that you are campaigning with Nicole, in the event that Kate wins the election for Grand Marshal, how will you mend a good relationship with the Senate?
Yeah, so in that event, as I spent 4 years on the Senate and I spent the last year on the executive board, I think that I understand both sides pretty well as their responsibilities and how they typically carry them out. So I think that insight is very beneficial. In my current role as a vice president on the executive board, I have worked a little with Kate this year. I don't see any constraints on that in this upcoming year if she does win the election. So I think the Senate and the Executive Board can continue bettering the relations between them.
We'd like to thank everyone for submitting their questions and you, Colleen, for answering them.
We actually have one more.
We just got one more in, so this will be our last audience
We
question.
just got two more.
Last
Keep
two.
submitting them.
And then we'll move into closing statements.
Yeah, so what differences in union use do you see between graduate and undergraduate students? What specific measures do you think would increase the use by each group individually?
Yeah, so right now, the union is very much used by undergraduate students. I think a large part of that is many PhD students tend to spend most of their time within their labs or their offices or even their apartments. So the union is underutilized by graduate students, though I would like to see a more, I guess, an increase in use for grad students, because I think it is such a great resource like I talked about. However, on the flip side, we do have the Clubhouse Pub upstairs, which I know that many grad students tend to utilize. It's a great social hub for students to come together and meet each other. So I am happy that we have that resource here, that it can appeal, I guess, in a different way to graduate students. But as I have been collecting nominations the past month, I have noticed that graduate students are around and are here. So I want to see an increase, but I'm glad that it is being utilized by graduate students like myself.
Finally, the last question that we have here is funny that you mentioned the pub. Given that the pub mostly serves seniors and graduate students, do you believe the pub receives too much funding for the services it provides? Do you think the administrative influence is unfair on the pub budget?
It's a great question. I think the pub serves a ton of students, and not just those over 21, because there are all-age events, including the weekly all-age trivia, that I do believe service a larger part of campus. And while typical 21-plus events are limited to some juniors, mostly seniors, and graduate students, that is a pretty large part of campus. There are quite a few graduate students at RPI, so I think if that's one resource that the graduate students are able to use, it is important that we keep providing it, just as other services throughout the union are primarily used by undergraduate students.
Thank you. That is our final question for you tonight. You have the opportunity to give a closing statement.
Yeah, I guess my closing statement is I hope everyone enjoys GM Week. I know that UPAC and GM Week Committee have been working very hard on all of the events, so I hope to see you all tomorrow voting. And yeah, I hope you just have a lot of fun. Stay later for the hypnotist.
Thank you, Colleen. We'll take a short break, and then we will have questions for our undergraduate president candidate.
Thank you.
candidate for undergraduate president. The lone candidate for undergraduate president is Ria Masoni, and let's welcome her to the stage now.
Somebody's on top of their sheet.
Thank you for joining us, Ria. If you would like to give an opening statement, you may.
Yes, hi everyone. My name is Ria and I'm running for undergraduate president. I am currently a sophomore majoring in computational biology and science, technology, and society plus law BSJD program. A little bit about me, I have been in student government since I first stepped foot on campus, initially as the class of 24 vice president, and then this past year I've served as the class of 24 president. I've also been involved outside of class council and undergraduate councils, involved with the Student Senate's Facilities and Services Committee, and I've been the publicity director for the past almost year or so. And I have also been on the undergraduate council's ARCH task force. Outside of student government, I am the Panhellenic Director of Communications and a member of Pi Beta Phi. And so my campaign is all built upon communication and transparency, ensuring that no matter what, you know what the undergraduate council is. The majority of students, when asked, probably wouldn't be able to say what the undergraduate council is supposed to do, what it does for them now, and what they would really like to see from the undergraduate council. That is something I hope to change as undergraduate president, if elected, to ensure that all students are aware that the undergraduate council and that the class councils exist, and they're aware of what we're doing. And so part of that will be ensuring that they have channels of communication established between them and their class leadership to ensure that all of this information can be sent out easily and can be found easily should students really want to look into it. And so I also want to be transparent about what I am doing and what all of the class councils are doing. A lot of the time as student leaders, we meet with administrators, but you don't hear too much about it after that, about what those meetings were about, who we met with, or what really came out of it. And so as undergraduate president, should I be elected, I hope to change that, to be more transparent and aware of what is going on, so that way the student body, specifically the undergraduate student body, knows what is going on, knows that we are here for them, that we are representing them. And additionally, I would also like to increase our presence on campus. And so part of that includes holding more events for undergraduates and building a better community and more school spirit. The undergraduate council is responsible for holding events for all undergraduates, as well as advising all of the different class councils in their events and activities. And so ensuring that those class councils have the support that they need and are able to make sure that their events are marketed and get the awareness that they need to be successful is something I would really like to focus on.
Thank you. Our first question is, one of the main responsibilities of the undergraduate council president is to help ensure that the incoming freshman class council has a smooth transition. What will you do to ensure a smooth start to the year for all of the freshmen?
Yes, so as soon as the freshmen step foot on campus, my hope is to be an active presence on campus. Make it known that the undergraduate council and the undergraduate community is here for them. And so part of that will be going to different events such as the activities fair, or going to their events through the student orientation, navigating Rensselaer and beyond. Those sorts of things will increase student engagement and let them know that, for one, student government is a thing, but also that the undergraduate council exists and is here for them. And going forward from that, freshman elections come up really soon in the fall. And as soon as those are completed, it is the role of the undergraduate president to reach out to the freshman class council to help them get established. And so something that I would like to do that is a little bit different than how it has been done previously is ensure that class councils get the training they need on a council by council basis. The senior class council is likely going to need a whole lot different training than the freshman class council is. And so ensuring that when the freshmen come in, they get a more in-depth training rather than just a general overview of what student government is. And of course, making sure to do that in a way that isn't too overwhelming is something that is a huge priority in including the freshman class council once elected and ensuring that they have all of the support and help that they need.
Thank you. Another question going right along with that is that The undergraduate council kind of serves as a way for the freshman and sophomore councils to get advice, ideas from the junior and senior councils. In the past, that has not worked all that well. How would you look to improve that function of undergraduate council to make sure that the freshman and sophomore class councils, the younger class councils, have all of the same, ideas and events that were planned in the past?
Yeah, so actually one of the things that I would love to do as undergraduate president is to create either a document or maybe a Google Drive folder that is a brainstorm of all ideas that have been held of all events in the past. So what that would look like is having each class council currently list out the events that they've had that they remember from the past year, 2 years, or even 3 years. And so what that could look like is just either the simple name of the event, but also a short description, some things that went well, some things they would like to improve upon. And so that will ensure that, for one, there is a standing document of what all of the class councils have done, but also so that way the freshman class council and future class councils can rely upon this to get different ideas about events, activities, things that really worked, and can really build upon each other. Within the undergraduate council, I am hoping to instate sort of a mentor program where a lot of the time, some of the younger class council members, specifically those that aren't the president and vice president who sit on the undergraduate council, they tend to be a little afraid to go to the undergraduate president, whether that be just because they're afraid to ask for help or afraid to run ideas, things of that sort. And so to prevent them from missing out on advice and tips that they could have, I am hoping that within the undergraduate council, we can sort of have a buddy system where the older class council above the current council would be willing to talk to the younger class council, share ideas, and also willing to work with them. Be someone who they can go to when they have a question about how to plan this event, how did that activity work, who should they go to talk about this specific issue. And so those two, creating a document of all of the events and also having a buddy system within the undergraduate council and within the class councils, are how I hope that I can aid the freshman class and also ensure that the sophomore class is supported as well.
This year, the undergraduate council planned a spirit week for students. Do you plan to make this event a yearly event, and how would you improve on school spirit for the entire year and not just contained to 1 week?
Yeah, so the Spirit Week that occurred right before spring break, that actually is going to end in a larger event. The actual event that it will end in hasn't been decided yet by the current undergraduate council, but should be decided by the next undergraduate council when they step in. And so that is something that will be a priority, is to ensure that the winners of that Spirit Week from the class council that received the most signatures on their banner receive the prize that they deserve. And so that event is something that is easy to hold and can definitely be continued on year to year. And so I do hope to establish this as a new yearly event and tradition that will take place. But other than just this 1 week of the year, I hope that by having more events on campus, partnering with more clubs and organizations, and encouraging the class councils to do the same on an individual basis will really increase school spirit. So some of the ways and some of the things we used to see before the pandemic were class hockey nights. Since the pandemic, that has sort of really cut back, and a lot of class councils are struggling to get people to attend those events. And so ensuring that students are aware of that these events are happening and going on and are meant for them, that there is whatever going on. A lot of the times class councils will have hot chocolate or food. Ensuring that they know of this and know that this is for them is a huge thing. And then also ensuring that there are more undergraduate council events. Right now, the only undergraduate council event that has really occurred in the past year was that 1 week of Spirit Week. And so ensuring that there are more events going on between the class councils and undergraduate council is really the way that I hope to embody more school spirit and bring about the community that we used to see before the pandemic.
You mentioned more events having other events. What are some ideas for these events that you have in mind?
Yeah, so a couple of these ideas are partnering with clubs and organizations for what they already are doing. And so a lot of those can be simple things as attending one of the club meetings or partnering with an organization like the Class of 24 Council did just last week to hold a Super Smash Bros. Night. Things like that are some of the ideas of events that can really go beyond just student government and class councils. Other examples would be hosting a barbecue that's open to students of all classes. And so this is something that there have been talks about within the undergraduate council, but there haven't been really any plans laid to ensure that that does happen. And holding more class nights and encouraging the class councils as well to hold events together would really be a focus. So part of what I had done as class president last fall was working with the current junior class council. So they had half of their class council on their Archaway semester, and so they struggled a lot to get enough membership to hold larger events. And so we had partnered together as the sophomore and junior class councils to work together along with UPAC to hold Union After Dark. And so organizing the class councils and sharing resources across them is something that hopefully can be done on this new undergraduate council, so that way more events can be held in a wider span.
I just want to take a minute to remind all of our audience members that if you would like to submit a question, we do have QR codes around the room. Feel free to fill out that form and submit your questions there. Now we're going to get to an audience question. So one of the audience members wants to know, what role, if any, do you think the UC has on student advocacy? Do you think this encroaches on the responsibilities of the Student Senate?
Yes, so this is something that I actually learned a lot about freshman year in speaking with some of the leadership on the Student Senate. Part of what I had done as class vice president was advocating for students regarding the housing situation. So the class of 24 in the fall that we started, when we came in, we weren't able to actually have the housing application, so we couldn't select roommates or submit any preferences for it. And so this was something that I had advocated for on the class council side. And so in speaking with members of the Senate, I was aware that this was an issue that could potentially be put forth through the Senate, but it was specific to our class since we were the only class on campus. And so similar issues and advocacy of that nature is definitely something that could be under the undergraduate council's breath. And so what that would look like is if there's an issue that specifically affects one class council, that would be something that the undergraduate council can really work towards. However, the Student Senate is the advocacy body, and they are the ones that are pushing for all of these changes through their various committees and council members. And so when issues come up within the undergraduate council, if they are affecting a wider branch of the student population, then I believe that it truly should go to the Student Senate, and those concerns should be brought forth there by their class senators.
Thank you. In that vein of things, the undergraduate council has what you call the Arch Task Force. In the past, the Arch Task Force was brought to the Senate and was proposed to be a joint committee between the Senate and the undergraduate council, at which point the Senate said no. How do you feel about that, and would you look to make the Arch Task Force more integrated into the Student Senate, given what their focus is?
Yes, so I, as class vice president at the time, was actually the one who had pushed for the undergraduate council's Arch Task Force to become a part of the Student Senate. Previously, the Arch Task Force used to exist as a committee of the Senate, and it used to function just there. However, it ended up, I believe it was around 2018 or maybe 2019, don't quote me on that, when the committee ceased to exist on the Student Senate. It was then pushed upon the class councils to really hold a committee within themselves, and so that information never went down to the next class council, and so a lot of it was lost. As class vice president, I had worked with the sophomore class president at the time to reinstate the Arch Task Force through the undergraduate council, and I'd also pushed to bring it back to the Student Senate. And so the concerns there were that it tends to be an issue that affects more undergraduates than graduates, and the Student Senate represents all of the student body. And while I most definitely see that concern, I would hope that this could be a joint committee between the Undergraduate Council and the Student Senate, so that way we ensure that all of the issues that are relating to the Student Senate and their workings are being brought forth to the Senate. And so this would allow for more senators to get involved on the ARCH task force and to see more happening with the ARCH task force.
So, jumping back to your role as undergraduate president and training the future and current class councils, we have a question here from the audience that says, how do you plan on training the future senior class council, considering you don't have experience planning senior events such as Senior Week and other events like that?
Yeah, so part of what I plan to do, if elected, would be to reach out to the current class president, who I believe I saw in the audience tonight. So he has gone through all of the planning for Senior Week events, and activities, and everything leading up to that, like 100 days, 200 days events, things of that sort. And so while I have heard about all of the fabulous work that he has done on the Undergraduate Council, as well as the previous class of 2021 in their work, I have not gone through this myself. And so in training the senior class council, I'm hopeful that some of their knowledge can be passed down, along with the knowledge of the current undergraduate president, Rhea, as she has seen and worked with the current senior class council throughout this past year to plan all of these events and activities. And so ensuring that getting advice and feedback from both of these members will really ensure that we are training the senior class council in a way that is most efficient and effective for them, given that they probably know a whole lot about student government already and have more specific needs than some of the other class councils.
Our next question, also coming from the audience. With being involved in so much, how do you plan on devoting your time to the student body?
Yes, so this is something that I actually have been working on a whole lot. I am currently the class of 24 president and also involved in PANHEL and within my own sorority. And so ensuring that I am managing my time efficiently is the best way that I can ensure that I'm really being involved and speaking with the student body. And so part of that will mean ensuring that all of my own personal homework, schoolwork gets done on time, but also working alongside my fellow peers. So going to different meetings, such as their club meetings, committee meetings, things of that sort that I have been doing a little bit of, but haven't really branched out more beyond that. And so actually managing my time is something I've been working on, and I think that everyone can always improve upon. Just finding those extra 5 or 10 minutes to work on whatever you may need to get done is super efficient and helpful. And so I plan to continue the practices that I've had so far in managing as the class of 24 president and being involved already and improving upon that as undergraduate president.
What do you believe is the most important thing you've done so far in your time in student government?
Ooh, that is a good question. It's hard to pick one thing as the most important but I have done, but I'm gonna have to say that it was ensuring that within my own class council and members of my class, there were effective methods of communication established from the start. The class of 24 began during the pandemic, and so everything was online, and there wasn't really a set way to communicate with members of our class. And so a WebEx team space was created for the class of 24 by the Office of First Year Experience. And so as class vice president, I had actually utilized that to create an announcement space where information could be sent out beyond what is just answered in the questions in the general space. And so ensuring that there were methods such as that to communicate with my class and ensure that there was a place for them to ask us questions and to be heard would really be what I would say was the most important thing that I have done so far in student government.
Thank you. Some of the class councils have struggled a little bit in their day-to-day activities. Part of this can be attributed to the lack of interest in joining the class council. If you look at the elections page on the Union Elections website, you'll see all of the class council races have less than the number of positions available. What will you do to motivate people to join the class council?
Yes, so to get more students to join the various class councils as well as joining the undergraduate council and the undergraduate council's committees, I plan, if elected, to reach out farther to students, to specifically target students who may fit a certain project or need within their class council or maybe a specific committee on the class council. Also, I plan to reach out to club leaders who maybe have students in mind or are already working on various things that the class councils are also trying to do. And so ensuring that there is a more indirect way by speaking with more students, more clubs, more leaders, is how I plan to hopefully encourage more students to get involved on their own class councils and with the undergraduate council. And part of that too will also be with just ensuring that there's more information sent out about elections, that more students know that this exists and the class councils are a place that they can join that is super low commitment and doesn't require too much of them. And so ensuring that, and also that students know what the undergraduate council is and what their class council is, will also hopefully help us to get more students involved within student government and in areas that they already have an interest in.
In your candidate profile, you talked a lot about events that you had done yourself. We have an audience question here that says, can you talk about some of your skills for delegating so that you don't have to do so many things on your own?
Yes, so as class president, a lot of what I've done is ensure that there is either a committee chair or a subcommittee chair who is in charge of planning the events. And part of that means that they are in charge of all of the activities and whatever the event needs. They will be handling. And so, for example, we have had an events committee on the Class of 24 Council, which has then created various subcommittees for the events as we plan them. And so having an events committee chair that is a resource to everyone on the council, and specifically to those subcommittee chairs, is one way that I've delegated, but also ensuring that those subcommittee chairs are focused on the specific events, and they are allowed to make all of the decisions. And then making myself able to help them has also been a large part of it. And so as undergraduate president, should I be elected, I hope to do something really similar, where all of the events and activities that we hold as an undergraduate council, it should involve the members of the council and not just be planned by the undergraduate president. And so I plan to delegate to the various members of the council and also to the undergraduate council's officers various roles with the different events and activities and what that might be. And so if there is a specific event that I know one of the class councils has held in the past or has great expertise, I would ask that their class president and vice president maybe handle some of the day-to-day stuff involved with planning that event or activity. And so just ensuring that there's a wider breadth than just the undergraduate council president and the undergraduate council officers is how I really plan to make sure that I am delegating out the work and including all members of the undergraduate council.
All right, we have one more question, then we'll give you the opportunity to give a closing statement. What do you believe is the undergraduate council and undergraduate president's role with communicating with the other legislative bodies of the union, like the E-Board and the Senate?
Yeah, I think the undergraduate council has a huge role in communicating with the undergraduate or with the other bodies of student government. And so a lot of what happens on the undergraduate council right now tends to be more focused on what each of the class councils are doing. However, each of the class councils is involved, each of the members of the class councils are involved in their own classes, in their own class events and activities, and they also hear and speak to other students on a daily basis. And so they are the ones who know most the issues that are affecting all of the undergraduates. And so through the undergraduate council, those issues can be brought forth by the class president and vice president, and I hope to encourage them to do so. So that way, either the undergraduate council as a whole can work towards that issue, work towards whatever goal that may be, if it fits under the realm of what the undergraduate council does, or more likely than not, those issues can be passed on to the other branches of student government, especially relating to the Student Senate, as a lot of projects and ideas that are brought forth tend to be more of what the Student Senate does as the student advocacy branch. And also relating to the e-board, if there are any issues or any ideas and things that involve them, it would be extremely important to ensure that we are communicating with them and working alongside them, as that as a whole will make a better student government.
Your closing statement?
Yes, so I just wanted to say thank you all for coming here tonight and for listening to this. I know that it is a Tuesday night and a lot of you have a lot going on, and so we really appreciate it. And I also hope that in the future, whether elected undergraduate president or not, that I can still be around and involved with student government and be available to you in any way. And so if you have any questions, I would love to chat afterwards, but otherwise, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ria. We're going to take a quick break, and then we'll be back with the GM debates. the debates for tonight. This is going to be our final debate. It's going to be lasting about an hour, and we would like to introduce the GM candidates at this time. So please welcome Nicole Gramenidis and Kate Bennett to the stage. So we're going to give 2 minutes for opening remarks. So Kate, we'll start first with you.
Yes. Hi, everybody. My name is Kate Bennett, and I'm running for re-election as Grand Marshal. A little bit about me. I joined student government on a whim in my sophomore year following a safety incident. I was really frustrated with the way that the administration was handling it, and so I decided that in order to get my anger out in a productive way, I was going to join student government. And I think that that's something that a lot of people experience, is trying to join student government because they want to make RPI a better place. Following that, I became the vice chair for the Facilities and Services Committee. One of the big things that I worked on that you might remember is the S7645 bill, which was the peace officer bill, happened back before COVID in our sophomore year. I spent many hours researching, presenting to Senate, working with the General Counsel on that topic. And then I became Facilities and Services Committee chairperson, and then finally I've served as the 156th Grand Marshal for the last year. In that time, I have fought very hard for student rights, and part of that has to do with student representation in as many processes as possible on this institute's campus. I believe in a step-by-step problem-solving process. Former Grand Marshals for years and years have stated that they want to increase student representation, but that's such a vague goal. I believe in SMART goals, things that are specific and attainable. So when I entered this position, I started off with student representation in hiring processes. This extends from smaller level positions up into, like counselors, for example, up into deans, and then finally into the presidential selection process. This was one of the main accomplishments of my term, was inviting students in to interview various presidential candidates, provide feedback, and ensuring that all students had a voice in that process. Other than that, the Grand Marshal is responsible for leading the Senate. Under my direction, there have been multiple different projects under Senate committees that have come to fruition. For example, our Summer Arch Career Fair project has taken off. We are having 3 different smaller Summer Arch Career Fairs this summer as a pilot program, and then that's going to extend out into the next term. Additionally, we saw a composting proposal recommending an anaerobic digester to be implemented on campus through the RPI capstone engineering department. So all of these things combined, I am running for a secondary term because I believe that I have the experience and leadership necessary to provide us with strength and stability during a presidential transition. Thank you.
Nicole?
Alrighty, hello everyone. My name is Nicole Gramenidis. I'm also running for Grand Marshal. I've been in Student Senate since my freshman year. I was actually inspired by my older brother to join Student Senate, Peter Gramenidis. He's been involved in a really long time, so I decided to join. I was initially a class of 2023 chair for 2 terms, and then I joined as a Greek senator for a little bit, and now I'm the current Arch Task Force chair within the Undergraduate Council. My platform mainly focuses on 5 key goals. One is accountability, mental health support, union self-governance, Greek life, and underrepresented groups. As everyone has seen, like issues that we've had at RPI, I've seen them too, and as Grand Marshal, I want to work to kind of address these issues, especially with the new president coming into RPI, because we've had like issues with transparency for a really long time with the current administration, and I want to work with the new administration to bringing back like, you know, maybe like certain traditions that RPI used to have and kind of having that back into the institute, and also having a more senator administrative, a better strengthening of relationship within that.
Thank you.
We'll now move into the question portion of tonight's debate. So first, we just like to say how the structure of this will work. We will ask one candidate a question, and then the other candidate will then have a chance to answer that question. Both candidates will have 1 minute to do so. The first candidate that answers the question will then have 30 seconds to respond if they so wish, and the candidates may engage in discussion. If the discussion becomes repetitive or unruly at any point, the moderators will step in and we'll move on to the next question. So let's jump right in. First question is for Kate. Next year, RPI will have a new president, as you mentioned. How will you ensure a relationship with administration that is beneficial to the student body?
Absolutely. So there are kind of 2 key points to my plan for the new president. It centers around visibility and education. One of the things that students feel the most is that the president is not really a member of our community. Many of us feel like she is really confined to the Troy building. I have personally rarely ever seen her around campus. So I believe that having a president who is visible and shows up for the student body is going to really turn the tide in how students feel about the position of president as a whole. For example, I've had administrators decide to come to the union instead of in their offices for meetings. And that's really been a huge thing to make sure that administrators are actually engaged in campus life. Additionally, I would invite the president to various different student events, perhaps engage him with hosting events like Hockey Line and barbecues and showing up for all of those events to just make sure that he's a more visible presence on campus. And this actually is twofold because first of all, students will recognize that this president is somebody who values actions over words, right? And so he says he cares about students. Should he show up for these events, that would be a sign that he actually does care about the student experience. And then secondarily, showing up and being visible in these various student-run spaces is going to be a really important methodology for learning about what the student experience actually looks like. When I interviewed Dr. Schmidt, one thing that stood out to me about him is that he was one of the very few candidates who decided that he was going to try and visit any area on campus, and the one that he chose was the union. At the time, he found out that he wasn't allowed to get in. As we know, it's all no visitor policy. But the fact that he tried and that he wanted to show up and figure out how campus life had changed since he was a student here, that shows me that he actually has some investment in this community.
Thank you. Nicole?
Can you just repeat the question really quick just so I can
Yeah. Next year, RPI will have a new president. How will you ensure a healthy relationship with the administration that is beneficial to the student body?
So I do think that having a senator and administrative relationship that should be strengthened, and not only just that, but having a strengthened relationship with the student body overall. One of the many examples that even previous presidents used to do, for very famous example is that Dr. Lowe, presidents many years ago, actually used to sit with students during hockey games and engage in conversations with them. While now I'm pretty sure Dr. Jackson has her own presidential space for hockey games. So I really want to work with the new president to being able to having face-to-face conversations with students on whatever events there are, whether it's hockey games or any types of events that are happening on campus. Also just kind of having just addressing the grievances that students have had with the current administration, kind of just listing that out to the new president. I think that'd be a great way to making sure that seeing how he feels about those issues and having so that that's not repeated again. And also another issue that we have had, at least within student government, is that administrators don't really go to student government meetings, even if we sent multiple emails, they just will not show up or they will not answer. And so I think having a better relationship with the president and also just strengthening those relationships, I think that'd be a great way to getting him to come to those meetings. Because as of right now, it's usually the VP of student life who come to these meetings. I think it'd be a great asset for the president to actually be there so that we can increase transparency with students and the administration.
Kate, we'll give you 30 seconds to respond if you'd like.
Yeah, something I want to highlight actually is something that happened during this Student Senate. Alongside members of the community as well as Graduate Senator Sasha Lusevich, we have actually set up a system to create an open letter to the next president. And this will basically allow for us to have accountability even after the current student leaders are not here. This did not happen at the beginning of Dr. Jackson's term, which is why some of those key student demands went missing over time.
Nicole, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I will definitely say that I've heard about that initiative, and definitely if I win as Grand Marshal, I will definitely continue that if I become Grand Marshal.
All right, for our next question, we'll start with Nicole. A healthy relationship with the administration is great, but in the events that you believe that the administration is encroaching on student rights, how will you stand up for students against the administration?
I definitely think that keeping the administration accountable is one of my key points, especially how I was talking about my platform accountability. With the administration kind of infringing on students' rights, I want to still be able to be a voice for students whenever concerns do come up and anything drastic that does happen. In the past, we've kind of focused on motions with keeping the administration accountable, and even though it's very important having these motions so that they are written on paper, I do think that there should be action items where, for example, the Grand Marshal, having meetings with administrators, or not even just the Grand Marshal, but having student senators go to these meetings and having these rough conversations with the administration. I think that'd be a great way to making sure that these things like that, like, so we don't have like an infringement on student rights. But I know that that could be very difficult, especially if the administration isn't willing to work with you. But I am very, oh my God, I blanked on the word. I'm very like, I'm really excited to work with the new president so that we can work through those things.
Kate, you have a minute?
Could you repeat the question? Sorry.
Sure. How will you stand up to the administration when you believe they have encroached on students' rights?
Yeah, this is something I have direct experience with. When we began the presidential search process, I discussed with various administrators about the process, and they said, no, students don't need to be involved in this. Students have never been involved in this. And so I believe that the main methodology to make sure that we can hold administrators accountable relies in a strict knowledge of history, doing your research, and then providing that evidence to as many people as possible. So when I was confronted with this problem, I actually did a lot of research on RPI's process for including students in the past presidential searches, as well as presidential searches at similar institutions like WPI, basically like benchmarking and engineering, very similar process, as well as getting statements from academic professionals within the within college academia. So that focus, basically I provided a huge list of all the different reasons why we had this in the past, proof that we had it in the past, proof that other institutions have similar processes, and proof that this is industry standard. And then I presented that to the VP of HR, VP Student Life, folks on the Presidential Selection Committee. And after a while, I worked through those concerns with the folks in HR and came up with the system of including these students in the interviews. So that's what I believe is most important, is that when an administrator gives you an answer of, oh, well, that doesn't need to happen, you can do a lot of research and come up with various different problem-solving setups to make sure that the thing that you want to happen does actually happen. So I believe that problem-solving combined with a good working knowledge of what's been happening in the past is a very important methodology for holding administrators accountable to the words that they say.
Thank you.
I definitely agree with that because especially I was thinking of the example with the peace officer bill. I know during Senate at the time, a lot of senators came up with they did their research on the bill, and even like other institutes such as Syracuse University have installed something like that, and it was shown that it was very detrimental to having like peace officers, like having something like that with RPI. So I definitely agree that like that is definitely something that like to address like to the administrators beforehand.
Do I get a rebuttal? I'm sorry.
If you want.
Yeah, yeah, so I was definitely, I thought of that example too. That was something I was on the forefront as vice chair. At the time, the chair was not really interested in pursuing that particular direction. So I worked with general counsel as well as just doing research with various other external lawyers and stuff like that to figure out what information we could present to them to make sure that everything lined up and that they weren't misrepresenting the facts to us as students.
We'll now move on to Greek life. What do you believe is the most important issue facing Greek life at RPI? We'll start with Kate.
Yeah, I think the most important issue facing Greek life at RPI is freshman engagement, and I do make that a very broad category. So there's one section within deferred recruitment. I believe that the deferred recruitment policy is negatively affecting Greek organizations' possibility for recruitment. And the reason for this is because when you come in your freshman year, you get to know people in your halls, you get to know people who are kind of around you, and after your first semester, you really develop a core group of friends. For a lot of people, those friends do not include Greek organizations solely because of the fact that Greek organizations are not allowed to recruit in that first semester. So it's really detrimental that, that Greeks cannot recruit people and rush people within that first semester. But then additionally, I think that freshman engagement can extend beyond just deferred recruitment. I believe that one of the big wins we had this semester was when we were allowed to have freshmen at events, period. In prior years, you had to ask people at the door, hey, are you a freshman, and turn them away if they were. Otherwise, you were violating recruitment rules, which really sounds ridiculous. So I believe in a problem-solving methodology where we are pushing for deferred recruitment to be ended, but we're also pushing for other problem-solving methodologies to solve the problem of freshmen not being aware that Greek life exists beforehand. So some other solutions that could potentially come up in the next term include an acceptance process, basically allowing students to prove that they have an academic record and a home life that allows them the support and stability to join a Greek house, because that's kind of been a concern that the administration does bring up when they talk about deferred recruitment. And then additionally, just keeping up the outreach on Freshman Hill, allowing for Greek tabling to happen up there, to just make sure that freshmen are aware of what happens within Greek life and can get involved even if they can't rush.
So I've been involved in Greek life since my freshman year. I am a sister at Alpha Gamma Delta, so this has directly impacted me. We have had the issue of like declining membership throughout like at least the past couple of years at RPI. One of the reasons is because of COVID, but kind of like what Kate was talking about, one of them is deferred recruitment. That was put in place that was put in place even before I went to RPI, and I definitely think that that is something that we should bring back. And I do have a plan to bringing back fall formal recruitment for first semester freshmen. And I was thinking instead of maybe having because I remember I know years ago I talked to people who are older where they would join right at the very end of August, that's when the whole pledging process was. And I think maybe having a deferred recruitment in the sense of having it in the middle of the fall semester so that students can not only adjust to the RPI's culture and the campus itself, but also just having fraternities and sororities, taking the time to reaching out to freshmen and also just promoting Greek life in general. And so I think that is one of the main things that we should bring back for Greek life. I think another aspect that has been very detrimental to Greek houses as well is also making arch housing mandatory in the sense that you can only live on campus and you can't live in a Greek house off campus or live off campus in general. And that is something that I want to work with the Arch office along with the new president at RPI to kind of bring back, because when Arch was optional, so was housing. And if they're going to make the Arch mandatory, I think they should at least make housing optional, because a lot of people can't afford to live on campus.
So I think that within Arch housing, there's been some projects that have actually happened in previous student senates to reconsider Greek housing as its own cluster. RPI works on a class-based advocacy system, which basically is clustered learning. And so if we start to redefine Greek housing as a cluster the same way we define a residence hall as a cluster, then that might be basically a methodology for convincing the administration to allow folks to live or in their Greek houses during the Arch semester.
This past year, one fraternity on campus, the Rensselaer Society of Engineers, has begun to return. A few years ago, they were given a penalty. Do you believe the penalty they received was appropriate?
Is it me?
Sorry, Nicole first.
Oh, okay. Wait, I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
The Rensselaer Society of Engineers returned to campus this past year. Do you believe the penalty that they were given was appropriate?
I do think it was appropriate, because especially now I know that RSE is coming back, but they're not coming back as a fraternity organization. They are coming back as from what I'm aware, I think they're coming back as sort of kind of they're doing a crafts type of thing. I'm not 100% sure. I just know that they're not coming back as an official Greek house. And I do think that because they've been banned for a really long time because of the controversial things that have happened within the house many years ago. And I know that now I think it's better, because it has been many years since at least the old members have been there, and I know that they're trying to bring back membership, because I think as of right now they only have a few people. So I do think that the penalty, I think it was justified, and also that I think that it was good to have a second chance so that we can kind of rebuild it to be a different type of environment and organization.
Yeah, so to provide a little bit of context on RSE's work, Jonah Mudzi, the previous IFC president, who I worked with pretty closely during my term, is actually one of the people who's behind bringing RSE back. And they are planning on coming back as basically a co-ed society, and it's built on the premise of giving back to the community. So they have a lot of really high-level plans for providing services, as well as getting rid of a traditional rush format and instead working to be mostly based on applications and reviews from that standpoint rather than the traditional fraternity rush process. I was not actually here when these sanctions were kind of enforced by the Institute. I have heard stories, I've read the news articles, and I've talked to alumni about this. I believe that it was fair based on the severity of the allegations, right? This wasn't, oh, I found a beer can outside of a frat house, and so therefore we're going to ban you for 5 years. This was an issue of sexual assault that happened within the house, and so it definitely made sense to provide that sort of sanction. I do believe in general, though, that the Institute is very focused on rules and kind of crime and punishment. And so when there's a small violation within a Greek house, it oftentimes results in really out of proportion punishments. And I think that practice should be stopped, even though in this one particular instance that punishment may have been fair.
I would like to say thank you for clarifying about RSA because I wasn't 100% sure what was happening with them right now. But also, I do agree that there should be a lot of reforms with how Greek houses and Greek life are treated, because with the Good Samaritan policy, I think it is very unfair, because it's kind of like a weird, they're not treated like actual organizations, but if there is anything regarding alcohol, Greek houses can be punished very severely and how you said, banned for a large number of time. And that is another thing that I want to work on with the administration, is reforming the Good Samaritan policy.
Yeah, definitely agree. Oh wait, do I get a rebuttal? I'm sorry. I don't remember.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, okay. Sorry. So yeah, I definitely agree in terms of the Good Samaritan policy. It's something that definitely, again, falls within the perspective of the administration being so focused on crime and punishment rather than on community policing. We really should be allowing public safety and other deans to be a resource for students to feel comfortable going to, rather than being somebody who you're scared of getting in trouble from.
Yes, just to clarify, if you feel that there's something more to add to the discussion, feel free to
Sorry, I
contribute.
didn't know
And
that before.
if we feel that it's getting repetitive, we will move the discussion on to the next question.
Okay. Wait, is there a limit to the amount of back and forth that can
No,
happen?
you can keep going as long as
Gotcha.
you
Okay.
feel that there is still something to add to the question.
Okay, thank you.
We do have a lot of questions to get through, though, so if you could keep your responses brief,
Sounds
that would
good.
be great. Now we're going to move on to mental health. So, in a letter to the editor that was published in the Polytechnic this past fall, one student detailed her struggles with mental illness during the arch semester. What do you think should be done to help students alleviate and deal with the mental toll of being a Rensselaer student?
Is this me?
Yes, go to Kate first.
Gotcha. Yeah, so there's a couple of different things that I see here. The first is the most unavoidable, is that we need to have more counselors and more psychiatrists hired immediately. The Institute did actually hire one more counselor as well as one more psychiatrist. But one of the things that I've noticed is the psychiatrist that was hired is actually also dual functioning as an administrator and is running the counseling center. She's the director for the counseling center. When you have a person who's being given those two separate workloads, any sort of healthcare practitioner who's being given an administrative workload, their healthcare practicing is going to suffer as a result of that. And so I personally have experience trying to get an appointment for continual care with the various people within the counseling center, and I've noticed that it's practically impossible to get an appointment with them, just as impossible as it is to get a meeting with them as a student leader. So I believe that that's definitely the most important high priority going into the next administration. I do also believe, though, in small steps towards big changes. One of the big things I see on campus is that our advertising of the mental health services we do have available is abysmal. If anybody has ever gone to the counseling center website and tried to find out how to book an appointment, it is in the middle of the page, a couple different scrolls down when you first go in there. And so basically, one of the things that I'd like to spearhead is getting together a group of UI and UX designers to basically discover whether or not there are some other ways that we can format the websites to make sure that the information is readily available to the student body. This is something we started doing on a smaller scale of advertising, where, for example, you may have noticed around the union there are the peer-to-peer counseling posters. That's a service that was severely under-advertised before my term. So
Thank you. We're going to move on to Nicole's response now.
Yeah, I definitely think that the counseling center does need a lot of work. I've also personally had experiences with the counseling center, kind of like how Kate said, they've only hired now a newly psychiatrist and also one counselor, but they only have 8 counselors for there's 7,000 students. And I was doing research about this, and I think it was the American Counselors Association. Don't quote me on that name, but their recommendation was having one counselor for every 250 students. RPI's ratio is one counselor for every 1,000 students, and I think that could be very detrimental because it's very limited resources for people to receive help. So I want to work with the director of the counseling center to work with them to improve the hiring of the counseling center by showing them the consistent negative results that have been shown on the Student Senate survey about the counseling center. Another thing that I've noticed is that, kind of how Kate mentioned, was that scheduling for an appointment is insanely difficult. The only way that you can schedule an appointment is calling the counseling center. That could be very detrimental to people who have anxiety. They don't have a scheduling system in place on the health portal. So I want to work with I think it was the chief of information systems. I want to work with them to basically installing a system on the health portal so that people can have access and actually book an appointment with the counseling center. But not only increasing hiring of counselors, but also just increasing qualified counselors, because I think it's very important to have counselors that can address people's needs For example, like having counselors that like address like multicultural competency, like have LGBTQ plus training, because RPI grows more and more diverse every year. And I think that we should have counselors that should be properly trained and things like that. Those are just some examples.
Yeah, one of the things that I want to highlight is that I think that every single Grand Marshal candidate in the history of time, or recent history at least, has come forth and said, I want to fix mental health, I want to hire more counselors. And having been Grand Marshal, I can tell you that it's not that easy. Our role is primarily advocacy, and so if you go to administrators and say, hey, we want more counselors, they're going to say, yeah, we heard you the last 6 times. If you say, we've got the Senate survey data, it says that mental health is bad, they're going to say, yeah, we heard you the last 6 times. And so I believe that what's important is going to be more of a focus on that individual problem solving and what we can do as students to support other students.
Now we're going to move on to student governance. Do you believe the current level of transparency and accessibility of the Student Senate to non-student government members is satisfactory? And if not, what changes would you like to make? First question will be, discussion will start with Kate.
Yeah, so I actually can reflect, I've reflected a lot on this during my campaign. That was one of the key areas that I struggled, was in communication of what was happening within the Student Senate to the rest of the student body. We definitely had certain methodologies for telling the student body or communicating with them, like the student government newsletter, but that we've mostly used as a methodology to get more people involved. We told them about issues that were happening, open projects, stuff like that, and not so much of a focus on the actual accomplishments of a particular term. And something that I've had a good chance to reflect on. So one of the things I'd like to do is utilize the Polly's Top Out column more, as well as cross-posting that into different chats. If you get a message in a Discord or a WebEx that says like, hey, I published an article on this random thing, and you're interested in that thing, then you might actually read it, as opposed to just having it up on the Poly website where people might actually miss that thing. So it's something that I definitely would want to improve on going forth in my term.
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so do you believe the current level of transparency and accessibility of the Student Senate to non-student government members is satisfactory? And if not, what will you do to change this?
I personally think that it could be more satisfactory, because a lot of people that I've talked to who are outside of student government don't even know what student government is, and they don't know what they do. So I want to work to increase that by streamlining more communication with, like, for example, like things like Reddit, Discord, and like a lot of like, class channels, and like actually working with like groups on campus like clubs, because I do think that as of right now, like a lot of people don't know what student government is, and I want to work to like having more transparency about what student government actually does, because it is very essential for the student body, because we like deal with a lot of like, again, like student advocacy issues, and like executive board deals with like different things like budgeting and like things like that. So I definitely want to work with a bunch of groups on campus to like increasing transparency and like getting people to learn more about student government, and like I think utilizing social media would be a great way to doing that.
I'm good.
One of the questions that we had come up through the audience is, can you please speak about why there are no junior senators currently? I believe that means there's only one, I believe, currently, or 1 or 2 currently, and how only 2 senators are running for re-election, and only 5 in all. What do you believe caused this, and why is there a freshman representing juniors? Again, on the Senate, there was a period where a freshman was representing the junior class, and do you think that's an appropriate precedent? And in addition to that, we would like to know your thoughts on the number of signatures required for qualifying for the ballot, since we do have a lack of members running. So if you need me to repeat any of those, please do say so, but we're going to start over here with Nicole.
Can you repeat it? I'm sorry.
Yeah, so the audience member wants to know why why there's a lack of senators currently at the moment for the junior class, and what you can do to fix that, and then we want to hear your thoughts on the nomination procedures for student government as a whole, since we're lacking members at the moment.
So I do think that in terms of the lack of junior senators, I mean, I think a huge part of it can be that, like kind of how we were talking about before, not a lot of people know about student government, and like a lot of it isn't promoted correctly. In regards to also like the lack of them, I know that there were like full of junior senators in the beginning of last semester. So I mean, I think maybe it could be because of like, maybe it's because they're on their arch away semester right now, and that's why they probably dropped on the current Senate. But if in terms of, I guess, people rerunning, I think that a big part of it is like maybe just like student government isn't being promoted correctly or like in the right manner. And so I want to actually, like kind of how I was talking about earlier, like I want to work on like making student government more transparent. And what was your last thing? I'm sorry.
The other question was, what are your thoughts on the number of signatures required for qualifying for the ballot, as we have seen a decrease in student government participation?
So I know that in terms of how many nominations student leaders need to get on the ballot, that has been instated like for a very long time, like even, I'm sure like even before I was at RPI. I do think that partially it is good to, like for example, with Grand Marshal having a lot of people signing signatures, because that is a way of campaigning for your platform. But I also kind of think at the same time it is like kind of detrimental now, because like part of it, like due to COVID, like it was like really is like could be really difficult getting nominations, because I feel like with everything like kind of being online for a bit and then like now we're kind of drastically going back. I do kind of think that they should be lowered, but like I haven't like made my full opinion on that yet. I'm being completely honest, but that's just like my view of it.
Yeah, so to address the first question about why people aren't running or why people left, I can kind of attest to that directly, since I'm the person that people come to when they say I no longer want to be a senator. And every single junior who resigned told me that they just were stressed out about the premise of working while they were on their arch away. I also gave them the option. I said, you can try to attend a couple meetings, and if you find that this is too stressful, you can always drop that. But that was one part of it. And then additionally, the part that I talked about with many of my 2023 senators was actually the requirements of their class councils. Our class councils make their own bylaws, and in many of the class council bylaws, specifically in 2023, it is required that you go to committee meetings. So that means that a senator goes to a Senate meeting, a class council meeting, 2 Senate meetings, and then 1 class council committee meeting. And so that means that there are 5 meetings a week that people have to go to. Class senators are supposed to be a liaison between their class councils and the Senate, and so to kind of break that liaison relationship and force class senators to be involved in like event planning, which they weren't really signing up for when we were told that they wanted to be involved in advocacy, I think that that's fundamentally unfair, and I've definitely talked to my running mate about the potential of how to work around that in the future. And then the second question was about, running. The amount of people who are running, personally, I think that that was a problem with how elections were advertised. As the incumbent Grand Marshal, some of that blame does fall on me, but one of the things that I did when I first began the election season was actually I sat down with my cabinet and I sat down with the Senate and said, here are the ideas that I have about like how to get people involved, how to get people engaged, and I wiped my hands of this. There were a couple different programs that were run by different cabinet members. I did not take the responsibility of sending out elections emails or anything like that because of the fact that it might be perceived as a conflict of interest. And so I think that the problem was fundamentally with how elections were advertised. I think in the future we should have more events like the Get Out the Vote Senate event where we postered and different things like that. But I think there should be one of those where senators and everybody can kind of talk out to the rest of the student body and say, what are you concerned about? If you're worried about this particular topic, you might want to join Senate or you might want to join a class council. I think that that was something that was severely lacking. And then additionally, I think I know many people who have decided to run for independent senator or do a write-in campaign because of either the nomination requirements or in the terms of independent senator, they don't want to be on their class councils. So that's something that we've seen from multiple different senators going forward. And then was there another question?
No, that's good.
Okay.
Would you like to respond?
I guess my other response is that like, because I just thought about it. But like, I think a lot of, maybe another reason is that a lot of people like just didn't run for like positions like in the formal way, because like kind of how Kate said, people can write themselves in if they're in, aren't a lot of positions that are like in the, like if there aren't a lot of positions within like one position, like for example, like you can have 4 class senators, and if like one person's running, then like they're like, let's just say they're not here and they're on their away semester, they can just write themselves in and then they'll start like right away after that. So I think that could be another part of it.
Do you believe, now this question will be for Nicole to start with, do you believe that a student-run union is still a worthwhile and reasonable goal?
I definitely think it's worthwhile because, especially with the new administration coming in, kind of reinstating like, because I definitely want to talk to the new president about like addressing the Save the Union protests that have happened years ago with the new changes that have happened then, because I definitely think that like, especially that he is an RPI alum himself, I think that he could hopefully attest to that, like it is very important having a student-run union, because like that kind of like you won't have the administration completely like over every student's head, like in regards to like making decisions, especially with student leaders. So I definitely think that like that is something that we can bring back. I have faith.
Yeah, sorry, can you repeat the question?
Do you believe a student-run union is still a worthwhile or reasonable goal?
I believe that it is absolutely worthwhile for so many reasons. And number one being that our students are incredibly creative and we come up with things that, frankly, other people wouldn't. We are on the forefront of the issues that happen that face us. And so, to have somebody who is in a different generation from us, who is not living through the student experience, come in and tell us what to do is, frankly, kind of ridiculous. As far as whether or not that's an attainable goal, I think that it really comes down to making your goals more specific and measurable. If you say your goal is to save the union, like, what does that actually mean? What steps would you take to achieve that? And so if you ask a student leader to save the union or to increase student representation, that is way too vague to actually be attainable. What is attainable is breaking it down into smaller steps. For example, I made one of my goals to get back the review policy for the Student Life Performance Plan this year. That was a key way in which we shared governance with administrator because we had the ability to review this long-term fiscal document for the folks over in Student Life. Getting that back was a really important way to make sure that students are represented in all of those processes, but it's not technically saving the union. So yes, I absolutely believe that student governance, shared governance, and saving the union is a vital goal that is absolutely worthwhile to fight for. I also believe that we have to break it down into more specific steps and to communicate with our constituents what that actually means.
Yes, I definitely agree with that because there is multiple steps. There are many different examples that union self-governance basically entails. I mean, one of them can being one of my goals for being Grand Marshal is reinstating the executive board's power with helping hiring administrative union personnel, because kind of a thing that happened years ago, before I was even at RPI, was that the director of the union was voted on and hired by the administration when it used to be an executive board thing that they would be involved in the hiring process, and the board of trustees vetoed that vote and got rid of that power from the executive board. And I think that could be a great first step into bringing back union self-governance and I guess saving the union and bringing back students' rights and having a student-run union. But I definitely agree there are many different examples and many different steps that we could take to I guess fully saving the union or having complete union self-governance.
Yeah, that's actually one of the things I wanted to highlight as a part of my term, was getting students re-involved in the hiring process. The director of the union hiring was what really sparked the Save the Union protest. And so the fact that students are not only now involved in the hiring of union personnel, but also in personnel for the Institute is a great sign towards a future of shared governance.
Thank you. One of our audience members asked, how would you rate the effectiveness of last year's Student Senate? And where do you think some failures cropped up? And we're going to go Kate first.
Yeah, so I think that in terms of successes and failures, one of the things that we really struggled with was coming back to an in-person environment when many of our people would also leave for their arch semesters. As has been referenced, pretty much every single junior left at the exact same time, which created a real deficit within our committee structure and within the Senate. We had one of our biggest committees, the chair of that committee had to go because of the fact that he was on his arch-away semester. That being said, one of the big successes of having him here during the summer is that we had a really strong presence on campus during the summer. The Facilities and Services Committee under Alex Patterson was able to basically address any student issues that popped up that were out of my radar because of the fact that I wasn't allowed on campus as a senior. So that was definitely kind of a give and take because we did have that representation in the summer, and in exchange, we didn't have that representation in the spring. So I think that that's definitely one of the biggest struggles of this year's Senate, was that we had such consistently changing membership because of the fact that the arch created a circumstance for that to happen.
Can you repeat the question?
Yep. So the audience member wanted to know how you would rate the effectiveness of this year's Senate, and what do you think some of the failures of this year's Senate were?
So I definitely think that the successes of this current Student Senate is definitely the work that a lot of the committees have worked on, and one of them being a great example is Alex Patterson, because I've worked closely with him and I was on FFC for a bit. He has set a lot of goals and he has achieved a lot of those goals, not only during the summer how Kate said, but also during the school year as a chair, and then other people such as Tulula Patch, who is the community relations chair, and getting RPI's name out there within the Troy community and having a lot of events so that we can have a better relationship with the Troy community and a more interactive one as well. However, I do think that I guess some of the failures, I guess that's a word to put it, is that I felt that most of the meetings were mainly motion run, and I personally like I'm not a huge fan of motions, and that like a lot of student senate this year was the motion of like a lot of appointments for people, like not just within student senate but also within student government in general. And I do think that like a lot more should have been done, at least in my opinion, and at least like with addressing like more issues.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I want to highlight is that there was a real push away from purely motion-based senates. In the past, the Senate has passed a motion on something and then nothing happens. Motions are useful for historical record keeping as well as for taking a stance with the administration. There were plenty of instances where we were able to negotiate our way out of having to write a motion. In previous Senates, you may have seen a motion about something like the summer arch hours for the dining halls, and instead what we got this year was multiple student representatives reaching out to multiple different administrators to solve the problem at its core instead of just writing a motion about it.
Our next question is for Kate. Kate, on Friday, you recused yourself from your role as Grand Marshal until the end of the election. Why did you do this, and why did you not do it sooner once the campaign had begun?
Yeah, so this is a two-part question. First of all, why I recused myself. The Grand Marshal is somebody who oversees all of the different Senate committees, including the Elections Commission. And so in the Elections Commission handbook, the Student Senate does, when they approve it, kind of sign over all oversight of the elections over into the Elections Committee. But during GM Week, I wanted to make sure that there was a real emphasis on impartiality and separation at that time. It's not unprecedented for a sitting hat to run. We last had that happen with Justin Etzine, who ran for PU while he was GM, and there were definitely some allegations against him that he committed elections fraud, and then it turned out that we got this independent commission to come in and nothing happened. So I wanted to make sure that it was very clear to everybody that I was recusing myself for the purpose of creating that impartiality. And as to why I didn't do it earlier, as a sitting GM, I had a responsibility to handle pretty much all other non-elections related business. I signed up for a full year term. People elected me for a full year term. To neglect my duties as the sitting Grand Marshal for the purpose of running a campaign would be an embarrassment to student government.
I would personally disagree with that, like that it's an embarrassment, just because like I think like if you already knew that you were running for Grand Marshal, like you could have had your Vice Grand Marshal like sitting in like the Student Senate and like working on that, and like you could still like have a direct impact because you would like still like kind of work with him on it. But like even like again, like you knew that you were running, so I personally, in my opinion, think you should have recused yourself earlier, like once you knew that you were running.
Yeah, I think this is interesting because we've absolutely had people who have held offices who have not recused themselves in the past. If an FSC chair decides that they're going to run for Grand Marshal, for example, that doesn't mean that they stop acting in their capacity as FSC chair because that role might be compromised somehow. I recused myself from all elections business from the very start. I made that clear to the rest of the Senate as well as to the student body, and I think that it would be unfair to basically just put my Vice Grand Marshal in for an entire month, which is the 12th of my term, when the student body didn't actually vote for him.
This next question we have is for Nicole.
Can I like go ahead? Like another?
Yeah, sure.
Sorry.
If you want to respond again.
Respectfully, I disagree. I don't think like a chair running for Grand Marshal is the same aspect of like a Grand Marshal rerunning for like the same like Grand Marshal position. I just want to give my opinion on that. I disagree.
Next question we have is for Nicole. This question is, you resigned from your term as senator before your term was up. Why should students trust you to fulfill your term as Grand Marshal if elected?
I would just like to clarify me dropping my Pan-Hellenic senator position. It wasn't because of it being a high-stakes position. I just personally, like in my opinion, was not super satisfied with how the Senate was run this year. So I thought that I could in that moment I didn't want to be on the student senate because of all of that, and also I still wanted to be involved in student government because I've been passionate about student government since my freshman year, and even during that time I have been the Arch Task Force chair within the undergraduate council. So I've worked on things such as I'm working on it now, creating an Arch Town Hall next month, and also having one during the Arch semester so that students can have their leeway and learning more about what they can do on their away semester. So I personally think that people should still trust me on working on being Grand Marshal, because I didn't drop just because I couldn't handle it. It's just because of the personal disagreements and what I've had on my side.
As the sitting Grand Marshal, again, I'm the person that people come to when they say that they no longer want to hold a certain position. At the time, that is not what I was told about why Nicole did not continue within her role as Pan-Hellenic Senator. I was never approached with any concerns about how I was running Senate or what particular avenues that she could have for success within there. Additionally, I think that one of the key things that will make a pretty big difference is being able to work within an organization that is not necessarily working in your favor. The administration right now, the Jackson administration, is not easy to work in. It's not a great environment all the time to provide support to student leaders, which I don't think is a controversial statement. So I think that it's probably it's important to note that the ability to work within an organization that doesn't always suit your needs is important for the role of Grand Marshal.
Yeah, and I definitely agree with that. And I did address my other things that was going on in my whole life. I wasn't lying about that. I did have a lot going on at the time, and I genuinely I just wanted to be able to take my time and space with dealing with my own issues. And so I apologize if I never made it super clear, and I probably should have addressed it sooner. But I do think that I think as a Grand Marshal, I do agree that dealing with the administration could be very rough, and it could it's still a really tough position. It could be very high stakes, and I do think that I could be able to do that as the next Grand Marshal if I do get elected.
Next question we have is for Kate. So Kate, there's 2 questions here. One of the audience members wants to know, what are your 3 biggest accomplishments from this term? And then the other question that they put in is, why do you believe the current president of the union, Yassine, who you worked with last semester, has endorsed Nicole instead of endorsing you?
Okay, so going over some of the 3 big accomplishments, I think number 1 was integrating students in the presidential selection process. That was a really huge win for shared governance. We got the ability to kind of contribute our own say into who the next president is going to be. And it wasn't, it was something that we had the ability to keep the administration in count for, to make sure that it wasn't just duplicates of the Dr. Jackson's administration. Additionally, secondly, I think that integrating students into other hiring processes was a really big win. Like I said, the reason why Save the Union protests happened, and the big spark for that, was the fact that the director of the union was hired without student consent. And so the fact that we were able to regain input into really key hiring processes within student life, ones that aren't actually in the union, was an incredible sign towards shared governance. And then finally, there are a couple of different Senate projects that have moved forward that I think are crucial for student life success. One of the big things is the Summer Arch Career Fair, which again, we're doing that pilot program this summer. In addition, the composting project, as well as certain other peer-to-peer mental health programs that are also underway within the Senate. In terms of why the sitting president of the union endorsed Nicole, it's an interesting question. That's not something that hats are standardly supposed to do. It was actually against the rules to do it until very recently, because it provides a really kind of unfair perspective to the election. So I don't think that it was right to do that. I kind of expressed to him, hey, this is not something that has been precedented before, and I would really encourage you to reconsider. In terms of why he did that, we have some philosophical differences in terms of how we think that different things should be run. There was also, some sorts of communication breakdowns that I think were kind of detrimental to that side of things. So yeah, I also definitely encourage looking into those types of rules of why the sitting hat was even able to endorse somebody in the future. I think that that's something that should be against the rules, because it creates a really unfair perspective of something if there's kind of a personal vendetta or anything like that. So that really should be reinstituted regardless of whether Nicole or I win next term.
In my personal opinion, this can happen in politics in real life, but also with student government elections. If a sitting hat, whether it's a Grand Marshal or a president of the union or undergraduate president, I think that anyone should be able to endorse whoever they want, because it's free speech. People can give their opinion on whoever they want. And although I can see what you mean, that sometimes it could just be a personal vendetta thing for whatever reason, but however, I don't think that it should be something that's against the rules, because at the end of the day, if someone wants to endorse another person because they mainly agree with their platform over the other person, I think that's completely valid, and I think that's fine.
There's a real difference between having a personal opinion and submitting an official endorsement. Having a personal opinion, talking to your friends about what you think the shortcomings of a certain person's term or a certain person's philosophy are, that's a really different thing than submitting an official endorsement through the poly, especially considering our ability to self-govern has been under question for very many years for this exact purpose. What I absolutely foresee happening if we allow hats to continue to endorse somebody is, number 1, the increased perception that student government is just an exclusive club where we decide our own predecessors, something that I have been fighting against from the moment I entered office. And number two, the perception that somehow we are influencing the elections in some unfair way by providing an endorsement for a certain candidate.
I don't think that's like treating it as like an exclusive club because like again like the poly is an asset that people can like anybody can use to like publish like an opinion whatever they want. Like I personally don't see an issue because like anyone can like publish something on the poly.
A common criticism of the Senate this past year has been that it's all talk and no action. One of our questions from the audience wants to know, how do you plan to fix the issues of the Senate not taking not making concrete solutions to problems and just discussing them?
Yeah, I actually think that one of the things that could solve this is communication. Senate general board meetings are not necessarily the ideal place for problem solving. If anyone's ever been to one, there are Robert's rules in place. It's kind of a really complicated place to like brainstorm and come up with solutions. And so one of the things that we did to try to prevent meetings from going on for hours and hours and hours is to do a lot of the work that we did outside of Senate. That being said, because it was done outside of Senate in committees, in one-on-one conversations, in individual senators advocating for their classes, that information didn't always get back to the student body. So there was a lot of action within the Senate, and frankly, I think it was more action focused than last semester's, where the idea of like you can just publish a motion and be done with it was not something that happened in my Senate. We had multiple instances of people who would bring up issues, and then there would be a simple solution that would be actually looked into, as opposed to just saying, oh, we're going to say that mental health is bad and we should ask them to hire more counselors. So that type of work has happened outside of the Senate. I think that the shortcoming is not in the work done, but rather how that was communicated to the entire student body.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize it was also for me. Can you repeat the question?
A common criticism of the Senate has that it's been all talk and no action. Do you believe that this is the case? And if it is the case, what will you do to ensure that the Senate is coming up with concrete solutions and not just talking about problems?
So I think like definitely a part of that is just like keeping like senators and like people on the student senate accountable for their actions, and also like I guess like whatever like opinion or whatever they put out there, because something that I've noticed like like it's like throughout my time at RPI, it's like being on student government since my freshman year, is that like a lot of senators can like kind of push for their own agendas and not actually reach out to their constituents. And I think a great way of like bringing like having people like being accountable is having like consistent constituency reports every month. I know that two previous Grand Marshals ago, Megan Letko did something like that, and that's like one of the things that I kind of want to bring back if I get elected as Grand Marshal. And also just sending out frequent surveys to like their classes, or like whatever it is, like in Greek life classes or like any of that. I think that's like a great way is like keeping like senators accountable. I think that's a really huge part of my platform. And also just like with anything like being brought forth in the student senate, like I do think that like kind of like how Kate said, like, you can't just say like, oh, mental health is bad, like hire like counselors. Like it has to be like, I guess like concrete things, and I want to be able to work with the senators to actually like when they bring things like that forth, and also just like with like committees, I guess just like, I think accountability is a huge aspect.
Hey, we have two more.
I actually take some issue with the premise of just like, reach out to your constituencies and that's the method of getting things done. That's actually not the method of getting things done. The method of accomplishing things is actually coming up with a plan based on your constituency's feedback. We have years and years of Senate survey data that never got used. And so the reality is that this year's Senate survey data is crucial because projects need to get built on top of that data. That doesn't happen, it hasn't happened in past Senates. Constituency reports were a great idea in theory, but the minute that somebody says, oh, our class is struggling with the arch, and then there are no solutions based off of that report, that's when the Senate becomes all talk and no action.
That is like essentially the job of senators, is reaching out to their constituents. So I guess like maybe it was just the wording of the way that you put it, but also just like I'm not essentially saying like, oh, they should just have constant presentations and like, because like yeah, Megan did have that where like you just have presentations every month in front of the Senate, and you're just I've like seen that personal issue for me too. And I think just like having like not even like it doesn't even have to like take up a Senate meeting. It could just be like presenting a report to whether it's like the Grand Marshal or like other positions on the Student Senate. Just like having things like that so that we can actually see what are consistent concerns that students have. I think that's a great way of having it in Senate, because like that is like part of their job, is reaching out to their constituents.
Absolutely, I agree that it's part of the job to make sure that you get opinions from constituents. I just believe that what Senate should be focused on is solutions based on those opinions and not just what the opinions are.
We have a couple more questions for you, then we're going to wrap up. This is going to go to Nicole first. What sets you apart from your opponent?
Sorry, I was just trying to think of what to say. I mean, like, I mean, obviously, like, one of the aspects is, like, obviously, like, she's, like, the current Grand Marshal, so, like, obviously, like, you've, like, had, like, more experience than me on the Student Senate. But I guess, like, just, like, another thing, I guess, like, what, like, I mean, because I do think that, like, a lot of the things, like, with, like, Kate's platform, I do agree with, so, like, I guess, like, something that, like, could, like, set me apart is just, like, kind of like I've had like that experience like within like not only just Student Senate but also just like within the undergraduate council, like seeing like how like class councils work, and like I've also been in like class council since I was class of 2023 senator, and also I was a Greek senator for a bit, and I am heavily involved in the Greek community. So I guess like in that aspect, like that's what sets me apart, is that like I've had experience with like all like I guess like all aspects of what like kind of what's in student government. Yeah, I guess like that's like what sets me apart.
Yeah, there is the obvious, which is that I'm the incumbent Grand Marshal, so I do have experience being Grand Marshal. But I think what actually sets me apart is problem-solving capabilities. I am a strong proponent of the idea that any sort of general principle that we're fighting for is probably going to be the same. You know, Nicole and I are both fighting for increased student representation and union self-governance and all of those things. But it's the methodology that differs. And I think that what sets me apart is my ability to take a problem and break it down into small, actionable steps, and then actually accomplish those steps within one term. I think that while Nicole's ideas are great, some of them have either had been attempted in previous years and have not come to fruition, or are just really generic principles that we want to advocate for. And yes, the role of Grand Marshal is to advocate for a principle, but it's also to problem solve and come up with ways to make student life better tangibly. And so I think that that's what sets me apart from my opponent, is really a record of tangible changes that have been enacted on this campus.
And finally, we have one last question for you before we get to your closing statements. With March Madness underway and only 16 teams left, we really want to hear your opinion on who's going to win the tournament this year. So we'll go to Kate first.
Oh no, I don't watch basketball. Is there one with green? Green's my favorite color, so whichever one's green. Sorry.
Okay, and Nicole, do you have an opinion?
Can you repeat the question? I was like, what?
Yeah, the NCAA March Madness tournament is going on right now. There's 16 teams left. We want to know who you think is going to win it all. Clearly, neither candidate really likes basketball all that much. But if you have an opinion, feel free.
Y'all, I'm not into sports. Yo, I don't know.
That's all right. It's a good thing the Grand Marshal doesn't decide things related to the basketball team. We'd like to thank both our candidates for joining us today, and everyone that has come to the audience and everyone that has submitted questions. One last round of applause for our two candidates before the election, please.
One last thing to note, since we did wrap up right about 8 o'clock, I believe a hypnotist is coming on in about 5 to 10 minutes, so we encourage everybody to stick around for that if you're free tonight, because it will be a great show. Other than that, please remember to vote in tomorrow's GM Week elections, and feel free to participate in GM Week events throughout the week. We have Winter Carnival coming up tomorrow, and we have a GM Week finale, I believe a Union After Dark kind of thing on Saturday night. So please feel free to participate throughout GM Week, and thank you so much for coming and submitting questions. Thank you, candidates.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, guys.